Our guest is Kurt and Lori Haskell. They are attorneys in Taylor, Michigan, and they were on board the flight from Amsterdam to Detroit on Christmas Day when the terrorist set off his bomb. So they're telling their story today, sharing their experiences there. And before the break, we were talking about how you folks were in the airport and the bomb-sniffing dogs were arriving. The security was very tight. You weren't allowed to do anything, basically, but sit there and wait. And you weren't getting any information. You want to pick it up there, either one of you?
Sure, I'll pick it up. The bomb-sniffing dogs got there about an hour into our time that we're in the terminal, and one of them sat down by a carry-on bag of an Indian man who was about age 30, who was wearing orange, the man I describe as the man in orange. And this man was then immediately taken away with his bag, not handcuffed at this time, but he was taken to a room, and we could see the door, and he went in, and he was in there about an hour. And
okay, just for clarification purposes, this isn't the sharp-dressed man that you were talking about that you witnessed back in Amsterdam.
Right. That man never got on our plane, and he was about 20 years older than this man.
Okay.
Okay, he was taken back into a room, not handcuffed. He was in there about an hour. He came out. He was then handcuffed and then taken away. Simultaneous with this event, an FBI officer came up to the rest of us and said, you're all being moved to another area. It's not safe here. I'm sure you saw what just happened and can read between the lines on why you're being moved. And then we're all escorted out of this large baggage claim area into a long, narrow hallway.
There were other flights that probably arrived during this time. Didn't you say somewhere that you had that nobody else was being brought into the airport, that the other flights were forced, the other flyers, the other people that were passengers on other flights were left on the runway in their airplanes as well?
That's my understanding, that no one was allowed off any of those flights for quite some time. And in any event, none of them for sure were allowed where we were at. We were what I would describe as quarantine. There was no one that was allowed to be around us at all. And this man stood by Lori and I the entire time we were in this area, so he was on our flight. There's no question in my mind at all. He was about 20 feet away from us the entire time. So we were then taken into this long, narrow hallway. During this time, one of the passengers on our flight went up to an FBI agent and said, there was a man with a camcorder that videotaped the entire terrorist attack from before it started until after it ended and gave 4 possible seats the man was in. And the FBI...
Who said this?
I'm sorry?
Who was it that said this?
This is a passenger that was on our flight.
Okay. And they told you that at that point?
They told me this later.
Okay.
Later. I've been in contact with some of the fellow passengers on our flight. An FBI agent then came forward and said, whoever was filming this, come forward. We want the video. Nobody came forward. They took no efforts to determine which passengers were in these 4 possible seats. And they could have confiscated all of our cameras at that point, but they took no action to do that. And to my knowledge, never got the film. I don't think they have it even to this day. When we were in this hallway for a few hours, an FBI agent came forward and then said, we believe we have those responsible for this in custody. Notice I said those, plural, not the man or him.
Right.
And he made 2 further references to more than one person. And then he said, we're going to be doing interviews now by family. We're going to wrap this up quickly, and you'll all be free to go. We were then escorted back into the large baggage claim area to start our interviews. And, we did our interviews, and then we were free to go.
Okay. So then you presumably went home at that point. And what happened after that? Eventually, I mean, obviously, it must have been the whole thing must have been an incredible experience. I can't imagine going through that. I mean, being in that enormous amount of fear, knowing that this could be it. I mean, this could be this could be the end of your life. And so you went home. How long was it after that the FBI came calling?
The FBI came to our office on the 29th, so 4 days later.
Okay, now what did you think of the media coverage of everything? What were your observations there?
At which point?
Right after it happened. I mean, was there anything that they were saying publicly that you found strange, or, was it pretty much accurate?
Not at that point. I think the media was, all trying to figure out what was going on. Not a lot of passengers were talking, and, the government was still trying to figure out what official position it would take on this, which they've now changed their story 5 different times regarding the man in orange who apparently had the bomb in his bag after we landed.
Lori, what was the... I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Their official position to start was that he didn't exist, and after I spoke out into the media about this story, then the position started to change. Story number 2 was, yes, someone else from the flight was taken into custody, but he was held on immigration charges. And then after I came out to the media again and talked about the dog finding something in the bag, then the story changed again to a man was detained, but he was not from our flight. And as I've already pointed out to you, that was impossible because we were totally quarantined and people were not even getting off of other flights at this time. I pointed that out to the media, and then the story changed again to, let me see if I can remember, it changed so many times. I think it was someone from our flight was taken into custody. He was held a few hours, questioned, and then was let go. And then I think story 5 was 2 people were taken into custody, both off different flights, but due to agricultural violations. So, they just can't keep their story straight. And now it's just deafening silence on this issue. You won't hear the government or the media say a peep about anything that happened after we landed.
So they got caught changing their story so many times that they finally got a gag order in place.
Right. Now it's just you won't hear anything from the media or the government about anything that happened after we landed. Nothing. Just total silence.
And, one thing that dawns on me is generally when somebody's telling the truth about something, they're pretty consistent with their story, and yet we have this constantly changing story that the FBI evidently couldn't keep it straight. Now, Lori, when the FBI agent was at your office, how did the interview go?
Well, they wanted to interview us separately this time versus they interviewed us together at the airport. So Kurt was busy or something, so I met with them first. They probably only talked to me for about 10 minutes or so because they were mostly interested in, I guess, the man that Kurt had seen prior to us boarding in Amsterdam. So they did show me a series of pictures, and they asked me if I could identify any of them. They showed them to me one at a time. I basically couldn't identify any of them except the last 2 pictures they showed us were the terrorists that were in question, although interestingly enough, the pictures are just the pictures that had been out in the media. I thought that if they were going to show us pictures, it would be like lineup type pictures. Mm-hmm. And the other 8 pictures were people who did not look similar to the terrorists at all. They were Arabic people, Indian people, all different ages. I have no idea who any of those people were. However, when Kurt was meeting with them, they showed him one picture, and Kurt's response to them was, "Oh, that's the man that you detained in Detroit that you're trying to say doesn't exist, right?" And they just said, "No comment."